Welcome to this week's portrait painting demonstration. Today we're going to be talking a little bit about using reference photos. A reference photo can be a very useful thing to have whenever you don't have access to the live model. Now I work from photo references all the time, and the only way that I can do this is that I have experience working from life. So in the next few videos or so, whenever I have access to a studio space with decent lighting, I'll film a video on painting from life. But all of the methods and techniques that I've given you so far in my previous videos work just as well working from reference photos as from working from life. It's important, however, to get the best quality photograph you can, and also to work from photos that are in a studio type lighting, that is, don't work from a photograph that has multiple different light sources, unless that's what you're aiming for. That's just more complicated. Try to set up just a single light source at maybe 45-degree angle above the model's head, and as you would if you were working from life. Just try to recreate a studio setting that you would have in an art school. So the first problem that you'll run in when you're working from a photo reference is that photographs don't record images or translate images the way that our eyes do. So that is, photographs, depending on the quality of the camera, tend to have a fisheye effect, and this fisheye effect will distort the perspective of the axis of the eyes, the axis of the nose, and the mouth. So let's take a minute to go back to my reference photo. As you can see, I've made lines for the axes of the face, and I'll show you how they're off. So the axis of the eyes and the nose and the mouth are in perspective. That is, the lines of the axis of the eyes and the nose should be converging at some point because our face is turned, and I'm only drawing out the problem with the axis of the eyes because it's the strongest. So what this is telling me is that either her left eye needs to be lowered, as the arrow is indicating, or the right eye needs to be raised, so that the axis of the eyes and the axis of the nose converge to a single vanishing point in space. Another challenge that arises when working from photo references is that photographs, especially smartphone cameras, tend to flatten out the colors. That is, you don't really get the full intensity of the light. You don't get the color of the light. And you'll observe this if you try to take a picture of a sunset or a sunrise. You'll notice that the colors just don't match up well with one another. But at this stage in my painting, that's not as important, because I chose to paint this more directly, so I'm not drawing things out as much, so I'm filling in large masses of color in order to draw on top of them later. So it's not as important to me, but what is important to me is that I choose a color that is relatively close to the true color that I'm trying to mix, and that is a little bit warmer and a little bit darker, so that I can build up my colors as I go. Since I'm working directly with color first, I'm going to be sculpting out the large planes of the face, and that is pretty difficult to identify in a photograph sometimes because the photograph washes out the color. They tend to overexpose and flatten out the structure. Now this isn't always the case. Maybe you're a very good photographer and you can set up your lighting and your shooting space well enough that your camera captures these plane changes and these form changes. But if you're like me, you're using your iPhone camera and you're taking photos under electric lights and you're not really getting all the information that you could use. So I'm going to go ahead and show you what planes I'm using. So I've gone ahead and drawn out the most basic planes that I would use on the face in order to sculpt out the big forms and big shapes of the face. And these forms would not be as clear when you're using a photo reference as opposed to working directly from life. So it's useful to have this knowledge of the structure of the head whenever you're using a photo reference so that you can fill in the missing information. The next problem you'll face when working from photo references is the tendency to get too photographic in your paintings. That is to copy what you're looking at in front of you, and that's not what we're doing when we're painting a portrait. I mean, you can do that. There's nothing wrong with that. But at least I try to look at a person, look at an image and interpret it in space and understand what I'm looking at and then painting it. So I'm more interpreting than I am copying. I like to tell myself that I'm making a painting, I'm not making a photograph. So there's going to be some discrepancies, there's going to be some drawing errors, and that's alright. I mean, old master paintings are filled with drawing errors, but they're beautiful. They're beautiful because they're paintings and they're not photographs. And photography has a beauty in itself, but it's not painting. Now, there's nothing wrong with the aesthetic of a photorealistic painting, but I tend to have a preference for painterly paintings, or paintings that were painted with a loaded brush, somewhat impressionistically, and yet with a strong sense of structure. Now I'm thinking of artists like Antonio Mancini or John Singer Sargent, and these are the people that I really look at and admire the most in my own personal work. Now, I'm only throwing an opinion out there when I say this, but I feel like there is a change that occurs in artists that start off working from photographs too early. Now, there's an aesthetic to photographs that is quite appealing to many people, in that they're very smooth, they're detail oriented, and they have every little hair shown, and to me that's not what I like to see in a painting. Now you can show a great amount of detail and still make a painting look like a painting. It's just that when you work from photographic references too much, you tend to get lost in the sense of creating a photorealistic image. Now, I definitely don't want to deter any beginners out there that are just starting out and all they have are photographs, because that's how I started. I didn't get to work from life in a while, probably a year or so after I started trying to learn how to draw and paint people. So don't be discouraged if you've only been working from photographs and you feel like your work will never be painterly or whatever. You get better by painting. So now going back to the issue of copying with photographs, you can always paint a painting that looks like the photograph or the image in front of you, but sometimes you want to change things. You want to manipulate the area around you, or you want to exaggerate certain things, and that's something that you should feel free to do. You shouldn't have to just copy exactly what's in front of you. You shouldn't have to paint exactly what's in front of you all the time. Enough with the sad stuff. Now let's talk about the advantages of working from a photograph. When you're working from photo references, you don't have to worry about things like models canceling on you last minute, or you don't have to worry about, how long of a break to give the model or anything like that. And you could work from your living room. It doesn't matter. You get the space that you need, and that's it. So these are the advantages to working from photographs, and they may seem like small advantages in that there are more disadvantages when it comes to the quality of the painting, but it gives you a great degree of freedom in where you can work and how long you can work. So using photo references can really give you an advantage in space and an advantage in time. Without photo references, I wouldn't be able to give you all as much content as I've been doing in these past weeks of my YouTube demonstrations. And it's really something that can be used to improve on your work rather than hinder it. It is important, however, to have a balance in how often you work from life and how often you work from photographs. So for example, for every painting that I create via photo reference, I have maybe 2 or 3 paintings that I'm working on from life. So it's important to have some type of balance so that you don't get too caught up from working from photographs all the time. In fact, you can also do master copies from photographs. Now, I know that many universities and art schools already do this to you as a homework exercise, but that's how I learned. That's how I taught myself earlier on. I would copy a bunch of John Singer Sargents. I mean, that was my life. I would just spend hours and hours trying to essentially copy the brush marks and the brush strokes that the photo reference was giving me of the actual John Singer Sargent paintings. At this stage in my painting, I'm really trying to practice what I preach, so I'm essentially changing a major part of my photo reference, that is the background. I, for some reason or other, decided that a red background was more suitable for this portrait. I'm not sure why, but that's just what I did. And you can do that. You can do that in a painting. You can manipulate the space around you. It may be kind of cliche to say, but the painting, your canvas really is your own world. Once you have the knowledge of structure, anatomy, value, drawing, you can paint whatever you want to paint, and you see this freedom in many of the old masters. If you look at Peter Paul Rubens, he's exaggerating a lot of things in his images. So now that we've reached the ending of this portrait painting demonstration, the last thing I'll be demonstrating is the earring. So I've made 2 brush marks so far. So those are the 2 light masses of the earring, and now I'm putting in a middle light. And to finish this earring off, I'm just going to make a mark for the highlight. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more weekly videos.